button it is to turn it off again. And because we're using this for attendance for this evening's class, as we go through the quiz, I'm going to say a couple code words during the questions of the quiz that people attending later will have to write down. I'm saying that as a narrative instrument, not for your guys' reflection, but for the people tuning in this afternoon. So, how was your first week of carving? Everybody enjoy it?
I kept hitting my hand. I feel like I'm going to cut myself.
I would recommend getting some gloves then. Did you actually end up cutting yourself?
No, I didn't, but I checked like every time. There's not any scratches, so I guess it didn't actually hurt.
Well, that's good. I would recommend getting just some inexpensive garden gloves, or like Walmart, Harbor Freight, any place like that. And that will also, the plaster dust has a tendency to dry out your skin too. So that might be a good idea anyway. Did anybody, I don't know, when I work with plaster, it kind of sends a shiver up my spine because it makes me think of like a giant tooth and a dentist working on a gigantic tooth. Anybody have that kind of feeling?
Well, now that you mention it, I'm going to have to try to not to think about that.
I actually think it's really nice.
You like the texture?
Yeah, it's like satisfying to like scrape it.
Good. I'm glad. One of the questions that I wanted to talk about too is, does anybody have any questions about what biomorphic abstraction might mean? I think we talked about abstraction last week. We looked at the videos on what the different sculptors were doing. Does anybody have any lingering questions about that? I think if you do, let's talk about it more in class. But I think as we go along, from what I've seen of what you guys are making so far, I think you have a pretty good idea of what we're doing. We're not looking for realism. I think one of the problems when we're trying to remove stress when working with a new medium is that if you try too hard to make something realistic right off the bat, you put a lot of stress on yourself. But of course, it's very easy for other people to come along and say, hey, look, you made a mistake. And I think that's one of the problems dealing with abstraction anyway. Having somebody who doesn't understand what's going on claiming that you made a mistake because something is a little bit off from their expectation. That's one of the nice things about abstraction. If it's not right at the realism end, it's like, can you imagine one of Picasso's sixth grade teachers telling him he's getting things wrong? You know, it's not supposed to be exactly realistic. And so hopefully you guys don't feel the pressure of trying to make the forms fit what they quote unquote are supposed to be. I wanted to get into the quiz and go over that all today and give you guys plenty of opportunities to ask questions and talk about examples as we go on. Let's see. So I'm going to do the screen share thing. When I can get to it. Here we go. All right, can everybody see this?
Yes.
Excellent. So what is the difference between form and shape?
Form has three dimensions generally, and appears to have three dimensions, where shape is any closed set of lines.
All right, I think that's a pretty definitive answer. Why is the difference between these two things important for us in the work that we do in 3D design?
I would say because in 3D design we deal a lot more with form than we do with shape, even though planning wise we deal with shape, so we can start working with form.
I think that's a really good answer. That's excellent. And I think it's completely applicable because it's very difficult to sketch in the air. You know, we use our sketchbooks for a reason, and we're trying to use that two-dimensional medium to describe what we're trying to see or work out the problems of in 3 dimensions. So that's an excellent answer. Thank you very much. Let's see. All right, now here, this is from the text, but it's also historical. What do you think the two mediums are, or the two materials are, that have historically been most often used in the subtraction or carving process?
Wood and stone?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, stone for things that they wanted to stand the test of time, and for wood for pretty much most everything else. Does anybody know the name of the site of the oldest architectural structure on the planet that people have discovered so far?
Is it Gölbekli Tepe?
Yeah, it's in Turkey, and it dates to the end of the last ice age. So it's over 10,000. It's over 3 times older than Stonehenge. And what's fascinating about that is that these pillars that were used in the building structure are all T-shaped, and they're covered with, many of them are the relief type carvings that you may use to decorate something with, but they're also 3-dimensional sculptures that poke out of these structures supporting T-shaped pillars. And I think that's interesting because when we look at the subtraction process, people had to find and move a stone that was significantly bigger than the resulting pillar would be, and then carve that down and carve that 3-dimensional figure out before they got to the main body of the pillar and then started carving the relief into the pillar. If you guys get a chance, look up that Göbekli Tepe, and it's Gopekli, and I believe Tepe is Tepe. I'm not entirely sure, but I will check on that. And when I send out the recording, I will send something about that too, like a short YouTube video or something. But yeah, those are the two most often materials. Anybody want to guess why plaster hasn't been used historically since the dust of time started getting formed?
It's synthetic, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's a synthetic product. And stone and wood are things that are pretty much most everywhere where there's plant life. So excellent. Okay, for question number 3, we have a code word for people getting attendance credit. That code word is lavender. Lovely color, lovely flower, and lovely aroma. Used in aromatherapy to help calm people down.
Where do we put in these code words? Like, where do we turn these in?
Actually, you guys don't need to. This is for the evening class that are using this for attendance. I'm going to also call attendance in just a sec. Okay, non-objective and non-representational forms do not refer to any object from our 3-dimensional world. Is that true or false?
I would say false.
Why would you say false?
Well, this might just be semantics, but the question says any object from our 3-dimensional world. And I mean, there are a lot of objects in our 3D world. So I mean, even though it is non-objective or non-representational, I mean, in my sculpture at least, I'm using a circle. So I mean, that could count as a sphere in our 3D world. So I mean, while non-objective and non-representational forms are non-objective and non-representational, that doesn't mean that they're completely abstract or that they don't have forms that are three-dimensional.
I think that's a really interesting line of thinking, and you're right. Non-objective means it isn't connected with an object, something that you could hold and pick up in the three-dimensional world. Non-representational means that it isn't directly indicative of an object that you could pick up or see in the three-dimensional world. So I think perfect spheres are really difficult to find in our regular world. If you're carving a perfect sphere, a lot of the times it's understood as a manifestation of a mathematical construct as opposed to a reflection of an actual object. So when you look at some of these artists like Mondrian that we looked at last week, he worked with squares, right angles, and lines, and those things rarely form in the natural world. So a lot of people, even though reality did inform what he was doing and inspire it, a lot of people consider those kinds of paintings non-objective or non-representational. So I think you're onto something. Yes, the answer to number 3 is false. I mean, it is true, sorry. They do not refer to any object in our three-dimensional world. I'm sorry, what was your answer? Was your answer true or false?
I said false, but
okay. What I was doing was listening to what you were saying, and I stopped paying attention to the question, but the words themselves and what I thought you were describing. This question, particularly the answer for the quiz, is true. They do not refer to any object from our three-dimensional world, just because it is non-objective and non-representational, because those words are used. And so I'm sorry for the confusion. I agreed with you completely, but the answer for this is true. It does not refer. And I thought that was the answer that you were getting to when you were explaining yourself. I'm sorry for the misunderstanding. But does everybody understand why, for this question number 3, the answer for the quiz is true? Does anybody have any questions about that? Because I think that the answer that was given is a really good point, even though the answer for this is true. While you guys are thinking about that, I'm going to go through. Is Kayla here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Is Sarah here?
Yes, I'm here.
Excellent. Is Camilla?
Yes, I'm here.
Great. Nicole?
Yeah, I'm here.
Bailey?
Yeah.
Excellent. Madeline? Is Madeline here? How about Emma? Is Emma here?
Here.
All righty. Is Grace here? Grace Emery? Is Summer here?
Here.
Excellent. Is Kelly here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Is Catherine here? Catherine? Is Taylor here?
Yeah, hi, hello.
Excellent. Is JC here? JC? Is Alexis here?
Yep, here.
Excellent. Is Brianna here?
Good morning.
Good morning. Is Brooke here? Is Lauren here?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right. David, I heard you. Hiram, you're here. How about Rachel?
I'm here.
All right. So again, what I have, the people that are not here are Madeline, Grace, Catherine, JC, and Brooke. Is that right? Okay. Even though sometimes we'll come across an answer for the quiz that the words themselves would imply a different answer than what is required from the text, we go for the text. I think another one of the quizzes, what's the simplest definition of a line? Does anybody remember what the definition of a line from the text is?
Technically, anything that's width is longer than its height.
Yeah, when one dimension is significantly longer than the other. Yes. And what's the definition of a line in the real world? The shortest distance.
Between A and point B.
Yes, exactly. So the answers we're looking for are directly related to the quiz. In the art world, when we see non-objective or non-representational, what that means is it's at that left end of the spectrum of abstract. And since abstract is a simplification of an observable form or an object in the real world that we interact with, technically non-objective and non-representational forms are not entirely abstract, even though they look like it. And I know that's a little bit confusing, but that's what the nomenclature is in the artsy-fartsy world. So when you see in the art context non-objective or non-representational, it does not refer to any object from the three-dimensional world. Even though I agree completely with what Hiram said. All right. Moving on to question 4. Monolithic forms do not retain the closed form of the original material. Is that true or false? Does anybody know what monolithic means? Monolithic, if we break down the word, mono is one, lithic is stone. So think Stonehenge. Remember the plinths and the transom pieces that are used in, or the shelf pieces that are used in Stonehenge? They just look like gigantic rectangular blocks. That's a monolithic form. Does that make sense to anybody?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for breaking the silence. So what does monolithic mean?
It's one big rock.
Right. So if we're using that to describe something, do you think that it retains the closed form of the original material or doesn't? If we look at the Osiris temple in Egypt, which is made of these huge hewn blocks of rock, which are basically just Lego blocks without the little bumps on them. And we look at Praxiteles, one of his sculptures of Venus, where he very carefully crafted a human form out of a stone. One of those is monolithic and the other one isn't. Which one of those is not monolithic?
The one where he carved into it?
Yeah, where he made a human form out of it. So for this question number 4, monolithic forms do not retain the closed form of the original material. Is that true or false?
False.
Yes, because they do retain the closed form of the original material. So yes, the answer to question 4 is false. Can anybody think of another example of a monolithic form?
2001 Space Odyssey.
Yes, very good. How about a non-monolithic form? Something that's a really strong part of the American landscape.
Mount Rushmore.
Yes, very good. All right, so you guys got that. Have any of you guys been to South Dakota, seen Mount Rushmore?
Yeah.
I went with my kids years and years ago. We went up, and on this trip, we determined every cool thing we went to see, we would ask the park rangers questions about it. So the question that we asked the park ranger was, what was in the 10 years you've been working here, what was the single dumbest question you ever got about this Mount Rushmore? And the park ranger, she looked at us and started laughing, and she said, a lady actually came up to her and asked her in bewilderment, how did they ever find it?
That's awful.
Yeah, she thought it was a naturally occurring formation. Have you guys seen Crazy Horse?
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
hope they finish it.
Yeah, they've been working on that for decades. When my kids and I went to see that, the kids were flabbergasted because Mount Rushmore fits in Crazy Horse's head.
Oh yeah, it's huge.
It is truly awe-inspiring. All right, question number 5. Stylized works conform to a particular historical style or stress a design characteristic. Is that true or false?
True.
Yes. Yes, it's true. Now, if you guys are taking notes and I tell you what the answer is, and you get it marked off when the quiz is graded, email me immediately so I can make the correction, okay? Because I've gone through, there were a couple things that I had screwed up with the key. So any of these, if we give an answer in your notes and it's different than what your grade is, let me know, okay? But yes, definitely. Stylized works, they may not conform to the present historical style, or they may not conform to a different design characteristic, but they will conform to one. One example is there are elements of Picasso's Cubist style, which reflects stylized elements from Egyptian and Chinese work. They are stylized, but they may not be specifically indicative of the present historical style. And that's one of the reasons why he was such a visionary. All right, number 6. To abstract something means to simplify it. Is that true or false?
False.
This is cognitively, I think it's false, but for the purpose of this quiz and using the text, it is true. When we abstract something, what we're doing is communicating, on a very complicated level. We're asking somebody to take part in just the same kind of process we go through mentally as an artist. We're parsing something down, we're simplifying it, and we're asking the viewer to go through the same cognitive process as we are when we did that. But when we abstract something as an artist, we are physically simplifying the representation of it. And sometimes we can add a lot of elements to it and complicate the textures, the visual textures, things like that. And we are definitely complicating the person's interaction with it, the viewer's interaction. But the answer to question 6 is true. we are simplifying it on a physical level. I know that's another one of those confusing questions, but there you are. This is a college level art class, so get used to it. Does anybody not understand why the answer to question number 6 is true? All right. Does anybody have anything else to say about question number 6?
I think why we get a little hung up is because sometimes abstracted art seems like it's not simple, right? Like it's complicated or convex, but really you can have complicated abstracted art, but it's still a simplification of something else, even if it's complicated, right?
Yeah, I really like that. That's an excellent way of putting it. Do you remember that the 6 phases of a tree with the Mondrian that I showed last Friday?
Yeah.
As he started abstracting it, there were a couple of those that were incredibly complicated. But still, he was putting in sweeping strokes to replace organic tree limbs and different things like that. So even though what you said is exactly right, I mean, it looked very complicated. It looked like he was, and cognitively, it was a very complicated process. When it comes down to it, the abstraction process was physically simplifying the thing that he was representing. So yes, I really appreciate what you had to say. Excellent. All right, question number 7 brings us up to our second code word. This code word is microscopic. And again, that is for everybody who is not attending currently and for attendance credit. Question itself is, the softness of the material does not equate to the ease of working. Is this true or false?
False.
True.
I really like the fact that both of you said at almost the same time the exact opposite answer. First, why would you say false? Or why would anybody say false?
Oh wait, I think I misread the question.
I would say false. I actually, yeah, I misread the question too.
Okay.
But I still think it's false.
Okay. Softness of the material does not equate to ease of working. So why would you say that's false?
I mean, I would say that it's harder to form something out of material that won't stay in place if it's soft. I don't know how to explain this. Like, if you're making something out of like cloth, I think it's a lot harder to manipulate than stone, which stays in place.
Okay, I think that what you're describing, you're right. You misunderstood the question. So, because
Can I change my answer?
Yeah, you changed your answer too, and that's totally fine. Because when we start looking at this, we realize how soft a material is bears very little relation to how easy it is to work. I mean, anybody who came across Do Ho-seo in the artist list? He's a Korean artist that works with draping fabric and makes these architectural structures with the draping fabric. Fabric is incredibly soft, but do you think it's very easy for him to do what he does?
No, and also I
Definitely not.
changed my answer because I didn't see like the not part of the question.
Yeah, that's the tricky thing. But yeah, but all of you, what you're all saying is absolutely right. The softness of the material has little relationship to how easy it is to work. So the answer to question 7 is definitely true. Softness of the material does not equate to the ease. Now, hardness of the material can make things very difficult to work with also, up to a point. Obsidian is very hard, but once you understand how obsidian fractures, then somebody who's trained can make an arrowhead very quickly. Has anybody heard of the art technique called napping? And this is not taking a nap. This is chipping, rock chipping. Has anybody heard of that? The Aztecs were master stone nappers. When the Spanish came, one of the things that really discomfited them was that a lot of the people in the area already, the Maya, for example, and the Aztecs, they made stone swords. They would take a club and basically line it with chips of obsidian, but it would be so sharp and powerful, the Spaniards saw a horse get decapitated with a single stroke of the sword, which you couldn't do very easily with steel. And obsidian is a hard material, and that, if you understand how to work with it, is kind of easy. It can be easier to work with than, for example, plaster, which even though it's soft, you chip it the wrong way and you lose your whole sculpture. So yeah, the softness or hardness of the material doesn't bear a lot of relationship to whether or not it's easy to work with. So again, the answer to question 7 is true. All right, now here's one. Who's read the text? And who's already taken the quiz?
I read a little bit, but I haven't taken the quiz yet.
Okay. Anybody here take the quiz already? Okay, I thought somebody did. The highest degree of representation is called superrealism. Is this true or false?
True.
I would think it's true. And I thought it was true. I think it's true. I believe it's true. If you guys get this one marked off, email me right away because the answer should be true. There's also hyperrealism. Superrealism is representation where more than can be seen readily by the human eye is depicted. So it's in the art world, it functionally becomes more real than real. And do you guys remember the name of the artist I mentioned who was a hyperrealist? He painted with a brush that had a single hair. His name was Ivan Albright. And he would make his paintings that were purposely done with way more detail than the human eye could ever see. And you had to have a microscope to view it. I think photorealism is another one that is very high in the degree of representation. And what I think is ironic about that is people will distort more with actual photography than sometimes they do with the photorealism. Because with photorealism, you can account for aperture and focal length that you have to work with when you do the photography. So the answer to question 8 should be true. Question number 9. Representational or figurative forms are those that relate directly to the human body. Is this true or false?
False.
All right. Why is it false?
It doesn't have to depict the human body. It can represent nature and things in the world around us, not our body.
No, that's exactly right. And I think that a lot of the times we get hung up on this body-centric view. There is a hierarchy of forms in the medieval world, but also in the modern art world. The highest material to work with, for example. What do you think the highest or the most ideal material to work with for a sculptor is in the art world? Anybody? Starts with a B. Bronze. You know, and so, and the lowest is going to be something like wax or lint. And you can see this kind of hierarchy of forms in other things as well. Like for, excuse me, what is the highest type of painting or highest painting material? You know, with gouache, watercolor, oil. What is the highest one in this hierarchy of forms in the art world?
Oil.
Yes, definitely. And what is the highest subject matter?
Probably people.
Yes, you're exactly right. And so when we look at this question, with the, all of us are trained as artists, we all have that knowledge of the hierarchy of forms. Representational can be anything that represents an actual object that's perceptible, and figurative, sometimes that deals with size, but that deals with pretty much organic bodies. That could be human form, that could be an animal, it could be an abstracted animal. Generally, figurative also refers to something that's right around 6 feet tall, 5.5 to 6.5 feet tall, because it refers to scale, figurative scale, which is the scale of a human body. But these do not mean they have to relate directly to the human body. So I think that representational or figurative forms are those that relate directly to the human body. The correct answer for number 9 is false. All right, now here's a good question. Number 10. Is Michelangelo's David a good example of an idealized figure?
No, his proportions are completely off.
Now, when they're adjusted for scale.
They are adjusted for scale, but
okay, but what I'm
I guess not considering that, it wouldn't be true.
Okay, but if we adjust them for scale, they are a really good example of an idealized figure. And what David is saying is completely true. Michelangelo, when he did David, he started off with an idealized figure, and then he scaled it and did skewed the proportions so that a human-sized viewer from the ground would see an idealized figure. But if we take it all in without taking into account for the human scale viewer, the proportions are off. The head is the wrong size and everything like that. However, for the purposes of this, we are assuming that we are taking into account the skewing for the perspective of an ordinary viewer. So the answer to this is true. For the purposes of this quiz. I think a better example would be Venus de Milo, or Praxiteles' Venus, or Praxiteles' Goddess Bathing. Praxiteles was a Greek sculptor that pretty well defined golden section application to the human form. His name is spelled Praxiteles, Praxiteles. Look up that name, and when you see sculptures that he did, it will show you what the idealized human figure looks like. Greeks and Romans did something called the Kouros. Does anybody know what a Kouros figure is? K-U-R-O-S. Anybody know what Kouros is? Kouros is a Greek word that just means boy, and it was pretty much a standard for acceptable human beauty in the ancient Greek and Roman worlds. Anybody familiar with the term contrapposto?
I am.
Okay, what does contrapposto mean?
I believe it was like one side was like dynamic while the other side is relaxed, something like that.
Yeah, exactly. With these Kouros sculptures, they would usually just sculpt him as a boy standing. But after a while, some sculpting innovators thought, wouldn't it be interesting if his weight was on one foot and the other foot was relaxed, or the other leg was relaxed? And so the Italians really loved this kind of Roman look. And you look at the Roman Empire when there's these Kouros style sculptures of important senators and rulers. A lot of the times, one foot is partially forward, or one foot appears to bear the weight, the other one is a little relaxed, and that they're using that contrapposto form so that it's not entirely static. And Michelangelo was trying to update that contrapposto style that the Greeks and Romans used in the Kouros idiom with the sculpture of the boy. He was trying to update that for his time period, and that's how he designed David. And if you are an ordinary person looking up at this 24-foot tall sculpture, he designed it specifically so that from your vantage point, everything would look like the proportions were ideal. One of the reasons why it is such a seminal work is because Michelangelo specifically took into account the perspective of the human-sized observer as he figured out what the proportions would be. So the answer to number 10 is true. All right, question 11. This brings us to the third code word. The third code word is finagle. And that's spelled F-I-N-A-G-L-E. My dad would use this word when he figured I was trying to get out of doing my job. I was trying to finagle a way of getting out of it. Okay. The question is, which of the following is not carved from the living rock? Look at Mount Rushmore. Look at all these moai of Easter Island. Petra, this is the red treasury of Petra. It was also used in the filming of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. And this is the Lashan Buddha. Lashan Buddha is carved out of a cliff face. Petra, the treasury is carved from an outcropping of stone. What is Mount Rushmore carved from?
The Black Mountains.
Yeah, in South Dakota. Excellent. And what are the moai carved from?
Other stones that were moved into place.
Yes.
Not living rock?
Yes, exactly. The moai are not carved at the living rock. They were quarried at a different site and brought there. So what does living rock refer to?
A standing, existing rock face.
Yes,
exactly. Like you
exactly.
said, Mount Rushmore is carved straight from the mountain. The Petra is carved straight from the cliffside, as is the Buddha. Whereas, like you said, the moai were carved somewhere else and then dragged to their current location.
Yes, exactly right. Very good. So living rock refers to in situ stone. So excellent. So the answer to this, which of these is not carved from the living rock? The answer is B, the moai. All right, everybody got that? Excellent. Now on this, we're not going to go over this entirely, but I want you to refer to your text. Each of these, you guys have demonstrated that you understand what they are. Static and dynamic. Static refers to stationary. That's what the root is. STAT. And dynamic means movement. Primary and secondary contours. The primary is the overall, and the secondary are the additional or supplemental. What do you think interior and exterior forms relate to? If we look at one of Barbara Hepworth's pieces, what are the interior forms? I would say they're,
So
what's that?
are they the shapes that are on like the inside?
Yes, absolutely. And more often than not, what was the texture on the exterior form? The really highly polished like wood grain. Right, so the exterior is the outside, interior is the inside. Excellent. How about positive and negative? We'll talk about this more next week. Positive is the thing that's built. Negative is the piece that's taken away or not part of the thing that's built. So when you look at a silhouette of somebody and they have something cut out in the middle, the positive form is the actual silhouette and everything that surrounds the cutout. The negative is the outside edge where we can see the background and where we see through the cutout. Does that make sense? We'll talk about it more.
Yeah.
And okay, good. We'll talk about it more next week. And I also want you to refer to that in from the textbook. Now, here's a good question. This is what you guys are dealing with right now. Why do you think the subtraction process is often a slow and painstaking one?
It's always easier to add than it is to take away. Like with drawing or painting, you can always go back and add something else or change it in a way that is still technically adding to your work, while subtraction, while working with like plaster, with what we're doing, or wood or stone, you take that chip out, it's gone for good. You can't put it back. I mean, you technically can, but your template is marred.
Yes, and that is absolutely perfect. That is exactly the kind of explanation I was looking for. Yeah, you have to glue it back on if you chip it off accidentally. And so it's painstaking, it's slow because you are making sure you don't screw up. Now with painting, if you do an extra line, you can go back and you can cover it up with another layer of paint, like Hiram was saying, you can paint over it. But if you're sculpting away and your chisel slips and you take off a big chunk out of the stone, it's either gone for good or you've got to find a way to glue it back on. So yeah, subtraction is slow and painstaking because it is a pain in the neck, which is one of the blessings I am sharing with you by forcing you to carve. Ha ha ha. All right, good job. I think that's the whole quiz. Is it?
Looks so.
Yep, that's the whole quiz. Excellent. So 13 questions. I'm going to take it off of screen sharing now. All right, can everybody see me? Still, kind of? All right,
Yep.
good.
Yeah.
All right, this is excellent. As you go through the quiz, if you feel very strongly that the answer should be different and the grade reflects something different than what you felt it should be, email me right away and explain to me why you feel the way it is. The key is derived, like I said, from the quiz, and I did screw up in a couple of places, but I think I took care of it. The key is derived from the text. Sorry. So if there are issues with your answer, email me right away with an explanation of what you say, and you will get points regardless of whether or not I agree with you. The fact that you're able to articulate why you feel differently, that's what you're getting points for. All right? Unless it's completely absurd and you're just making it up because you're wasting everybody's time, which of course you guys never do. Was going through this quiz beneficial?
They always are, Andrew.
All
Absolutely.
right, great.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, before we close, one last call. Is Madeline here? Grace?
Here.
Catherine? Oh, Grace, you are here?
Yeah.
All right. So you came in a little late?
Yeah.
All right. How about Catherine? Are you here? JC? Brooke? All right. Okay, guys, as soon as this Microsoft gives me the recording, I will email it to everybody. And I hope you guys have a wonderful 3-day weekend. Does anybody have classes on Monday? I hope not. Okay, good. You guys have a wonderful 3-day weekend. Enjoy yourselves. Get stuff done. And again, you have access to that room and to carve as long as you clean up after yourself and you don't impact another scheduled class. All right? So we'll see you guys later.
Thank you. Bye, Andrew.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.